Hello and welcome to one and all. I am Mrs. Sujata Ali, lecturer, Department of English, teaching in Dharampet, MPDO Memorial Science College, Nagpur. I am indeed delighted to be sharing this platform of botany for you, in which I will be delivering a lecture and presentation on effective communication skills. Communication is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information or to express your ideas, your thoughts, your feelings to somebody else. Life cannot exist without communication. While communicating, we connect to each other throughout the day, right from the time we wake up till the time we retire. We are using different mediums of communicating with each other. It can be from person to person, it can be via the telephone. We may be communicating with the help of emails, text messages, or letters, and several other mediums can also be used. We also communicate by our body language, the gestures that we use, the eye contact that is made, and the different expressions that are visible on our face. Since ancient times, man has been trying to communicate. Speech is perhaps one of the most ancient means of communication. Likewise, dance and music is also one of the ancient means of communication. Besides this, there were other mediums of communication used in the ancient days. Signifiers were used in the earlier days. Totems, rudimentary codes were used for distant communication along with signifiers. Drums could be heard at great distances and were also used to communicate. Proto-alphabets and pictographs were used as early as 60,000 years ago. Genuine writing came into being somewhere around 6,000 years before Christ with the Vinca script. This script was typically impressed on clay and had to be let out to dry. Once paper was invented, things really took off literally. So you see, we have come a long way since those earliest times when we had to take so much of efforts in order to communicate with each other. Through the number of years, we have evolved and invented so many techniques and methods in order to be able to communicate smoothly and effectively. Quoting one simple example, nowadays, if we have a smartphone with us, we simply have to speak to our phone and instantly we see that our speech is converted to text, and in the next minute we have the entire script in front of us. So you see, it has basically become a very easy task, and yet we find it extremely difficult to communicate when it comes to speaking. This is the problem which is faced by a number of people. We all want to communicate fluently, speak in an effective manner, be extremely impressive, and most important of all, we also want to create a lasting impression on the minds of the listeners or the receivers. Every communication involves at least one sender, a message, and the receiver. The most important aspect to be remembered at all times is that every communication is made to attain a particular objective. Let me demonstrate this by telling you a simple anecdote. You all, I'm sure, have read the story or at least have heard of the story Alice in Wonderland. In the story, there is the main character of the story who is Alice. She is the protagonist who happens to enter into a land which is filled with magical atmosphere. It's a picturesque view everywhere. She is walking down the path and she doesn't know where exactly she is headed, but nevertheless, she walks down the path. As she is walking through, she comes across a fork on the path. A fork means there are two roads that are diverging in two different directions. Now, Alice gets a little bit confused and doesn't know which is the road that she is supposed to walk down upon, which is the road that she is supposed to take. She is standing there at the fork thinking, okay, now where should I go? At that moment, there is a wise man that happens to come across on the road, reaches that particular place where Alice is standing. Now, she asks this wise man, "Excuse me, sir, can you please tell me which road should I take for my onward journey?" The wise old man ponders over the question for a moment and asks Alice, "Could you please tell me what is your destination?" Alice says that she doesn't have any destination in mind. She just wants to go anywhere. To this, the wise man gives a fitting reply to Alice, saying, "Then you can take any road because either of the road is going to take you anywhere." So you see, my dear friends, your objective should be clearly defined. Similarly, when it comes to you engaging in communicating with your audience, with the person, with the receiver, if your objective is clear, if you know what you need to be focusing upon, what is the point that you need to cover, then you will know exactly how you are supposed to move forward. Now, communication is nothing but it is a skill that needs to be learned, that needs to be practiced on a daily basis. Nobody, trust me, is a born speaker, a born orator. Nobody can do it, okay? Everybody has learned the skill over a number of years, have practiced, have improvised, have kept on editing, have kept on correcting themselves to have reached a point of perfection. When we hear the great speakers speaking, we all get this feeling inside, "Oh, I wish I could speak like that person." But let me tell you, dear friends, we all can. All it needs on your part is to be a little bit focused, is to learn the art of speaking and communicating effectively. Now, since this is a skill, there are certain points that need to be borne in mind based on how you are supposed to speak effectively and fluently. I will be telling you about the few skills which I personally feel is very important when it comes to speaking effectively, communicating effectively. I will be discussing each of the skills with you, as again I am emphasizing on the fact that these are the skills which I personally feel are important in order to be able to speak effectively. So I will begin by explaining each skill along with the slides that I have prepared for you. As I had already told you earlier, I will now be discussing about the various skills required in order to be able to communicate effectively. One of the most important skills in active communication is the art of listening. You have to be a good listener in order to be able to respond. We generally tend to overlook this incredibly important skill. The word listen contains the same letters as the word silent. Let me demonstrate the importance of listening by narrating a small anecdote. My principal had asked all of us to give the answer to a question that she had put forth before us. She said, Ramu is a boy who works at a butcher's shop. His height is 5 feet 6 inches. His waist was 36 inches. He worked daily for 10 hours and was earning 50 rupees per day. What did he weigh? Everybody in the class started calculating in order to take out what was the weight of Ramu. Some started multiplying, some started dividing, some started adding, some did subtraction, everything they could possibly do. But whatever answer they came up with, the principal always said that it was not the right answer. After several people kept trying, there was one boy in the class who stood up and said, Teacher, I have the right answer for you. Ramu weighed meat. Now just see, what was the question that was asked by our principal, who was our teacher? She had said, what did he weigh? And did not say what was his weight. So what did most of the students in the class do? They had been distracted. They were not listening to what the teacher was telling them, and automatically, since the earlier few sentences spoken by the teacher referred to some statistical data about the boy, we just jumped to the conclusion. Most of the students in the class basically jumped to the conclusion that the teacher is asking for the weight of Ramu, but on the contrary, the teacher was asking what did he weigh, which was, since he was working in a butcher shop, obviously he was weighing meat all the time. There you go, the importance of listening. It is very, very crucial to every communication. Do not listen to reply, but you need to listen to understand, to comprehend what is being spoken by the other person. When you listen attentively, it is only then that you are in a position to give the right reply, to give the correct response, or be able to put forth questions to certain parts of what has been spoken which you have not understood correctly. Another very important aspect or skill of effective communication is the non-verbal communication. This is one particular point which I will also be elaborating in more details in the other lectures that I will be taking up from this platform. But right now, I can't think of moving ahead with my lecture without speaking a little bit on this particular point. The words we choose make up 7% of the message being conveyed, which is why non-verbal communication becomes all the more important. Body language is an important communication tool. Your body language should help convey what you are trying to say. Other factors to consider are the tone of your voice, your hand gestures, the eye contact that you make. Very, very important. In the art of communication, see to it that you establish an eye contact with the person with whom you are talking to, you are communicating. Try to get and establish an eye contact with the audiences if you are trying to communicate with an entire audience. While speaking, try to smile a little bit in between. Your face should appear pleasing. All these small things go a long way in making your communication more effective. When you are making eye contact with the audience, see to it that you do not stare for a very long time at one particular person, because that is not considered as congenial, that is not considered as proper etiquettes. Simultaneously, you should also be able to recognize the non-verbal signals being displayed to you by the other person, by your audiences. Let me demonstrate this by a very good example that I am going to give you right now. In fact, there are a number of examples that can be quoted, but I'll just be specific and tell you one or two. When we go to teach in class and while delivering lectures, of course, I know that we are given a 45-minute period in which we have to deliver one lecture. Now, trust me, it is very difficult for the students to concentrate and focus on what is being taught to them for the entire 45 minutes, because prior to my lecture, there are other lectures that have been held, as well as other lectures are going to be held after I complete mine. So, there comes a point in time when the student starts getting bored, starts getting disconnected, starts getting disoriented, is not able to focus on what is being told. Now, if the teacher is attentive, she will immediately be able to recognize this by the different gestures that are being shown by the students. And by that, the teacher should then change her method of teaching, enter into a conversation, go in for group discussions, start talking about something else other than the lecture in order to get the students involved once again in the class. Another example that can be quoted in body languages, which I'm sure all of you have experienced at one point in time or the other. Generally, when we are having a conversation, for example, if you have a conversation with a friend of yours, you are trying to tell him or her something which is you feel is very important to you, and it needs to be communicated to your friend. When you start telling about that particular subject, you start dealing about that particular subject, speaking on that particular topic, you notice that your friend is busy with her cell phone, either scrolling through the several stories that have been uploaded or posted on the Instagram, or she's just scrolling through the Facebook account of hers, paying half attention to what you are speaking, and half of her attention is diverted towards her cell phone. What does this tell you about your friend? It is very obvious that it immediately reflects, it immediately tells you that your friend is not really interested in listening to what you have to say and doesn't feel it important to give you her 100% attention. So this is one thing also that needs to be rectified. If you tend to do it, you have to stop yourself from behaving in such manners, because it speaks volumes about you. It tells that you are a person who cannot give your undivided attention to something which is of significance, which is of importance. So, Whenever you go for attending conferences, seminars, lectures, etc., these small things need to be taken into consideration, need to be remembered, and you should try to learn from this non-verbal communication. What is it that the other person is trying to communicate to you? You also need to learn how you are supposed to behave when you are also going for such programs, or when you are the one who is conducting. You also have to remember what your body language is supposed to be like. The next important skill in effective communication is to be clear and concise. The very word speaks for itself. You need to know exactly what it is that you want to be communicating. Brevity can be a real asset. Whether you're interviewing, whether you're presenting, or you're just talking about something you're passionate about, knowing how to communicate your ideas in a succinct manner can go a long way. Rambling on, conversely, may lose your audience. Before speaking, you need to give some thought regarding what is the message that you want to convey. In order to be clear, you should be aware what you are trying to focus on, or what is it that your thought process that you're trying to drive at to get a favorable response and understanding from your audience. Don't beat about the bush. Do not be repetitive. You should try to say exactly what it is that you wish to communicate. Do not confuse the audience. Do not make use of ambiguous words, words which have double meaning, so that the person does not know what exactly you are trying to tell him or her. So, that is precisely what we mean by being very clear and concise. Concise meaning you have to be as brief as possible in order to prove yourselves to be effective communicators. Another important skill that we are going to discuss today in brief is you need to be confident. Confidence underpins all effective communication. It is your confidence that exuberates the way in which you speak. If your communicator, the person who is speaking, shows confidence in what he or she is saying, it is but natural for the other person to agree to his point of view and also feel that what is being spoken by the person has to be true, has to be correct to a certain extent. While communicating, if you tend to mumble, you tend to stammer, you tend to hesitate in between sentences, your thought processes are not properly organized, are not in the right sequence, you will realize that the message that is conveyed to the audience is okay. This person is not well prepared. He or she doesn't know what he or she needs to say, what he needs to focus on, what he is trying to tell you. So, all this can be read from the way in which you are presenting, the way in which you are communicating whatever it is that you want to communicate to the respective audiences. While showing your confidence, you need to again remember to maintain an eye contact. Have a friendly smile, okay? Try to explain a particular thing in maybe one or two different ways, so that you know that the one who is at the other end is able to understand what you are trying to tell them. Never be aggressive in your speeches, in whatever you want to speak. You don't have to be aggressive. You need to be very polite. You need to be very gentle in the way you're speaking. Your mannerisms are also reflected in the way in which you communicate. Your politeness, okay? All these small things go a long way in making your communication skills more effective. The next important skill for effective communication is one must have an open mind. In order to be an effective communicator, you need to have an open mind. You should approach each conversation in a flexible and open manner. Your mind needs to absorb the views and opinions of others. Do not be very rigid or stubborn in making others strictly adhere to your point of view. It isn't always easy to do so, but it is very important in communicating effectively. Adopting this approach will always ensure honest, productive communication. We all have things that we can learn from others. So, when you're truly open minded, you'll implement those discoveries in your life. There's an honesty that comes with an open mind, because being open minded means admitting that you do not know everything and there is still so much scope for you to learn from others. This also enables you to develop your critical thinking and reasoning. Let me tell you a small anecdote. Teaching English in a science college is an entirely different experience. At times, it is also cumbersome and tedious on a teacher. So, I remember I was teaching a one-act play to my students, which is generally the last chapter of your textbook. Now, there was less time. I needed to cover the syllabus. The exams were approaching, and that particular play had been prescribed for them in their portion. That had to be covered in their syllabus. So I was basically rushing through and didn't really dedicate the amount of time that was required in order to teach the one-act play in an effective manner. I was halfway through the play when one of my students got up and asked me, of course, after taking prior permission, that, "Ma'am, what if you taught us this one-act play in a drama form? How would it be if we enacted this one-act play in our class itself so that it would enable us to understand the play better?" See, I was a teacher. If I would have just rebuked my student, asked him to sit down, okay, and said, "No, we really don't have time to go about doing it in that manner," etc., etc., you should understand the way I am teaching you, and I'm sure you have to just go home and go through that entire chapter and you will be able to understand. That would have been the easiest thing for me to do. But I gave it a thought to what was being told to me by my student, and after reflecting upon it, I said, yes, why not? That's a really good idea that had been told by my student. I accepted it. I knew that that would be a better way to teach the one-act play to my students so that they would be able to remember the entire story and understand as well the entire story in a better manner. So here, what did I just demonstrate to you? That yes, I was open-minded about the suggestion that was given to me by my student, okay, and I implemented that suggestion after reflecting upon it and obviously got the desired result. So that is how you need to also be when you are trying to communicate with somebody as well. Another important skill that I will be sharing with you today in order to have effective communication is to have a feeling of empathy. Empathy is nothing but the desire to try and understand what the other person is feeling, what is the opinion of the other person. It is not necessary that you have to agree to everything that the person is saying, but nevertheless, you need to give that person a patient listening. You need to understand from his or her perspective what he or she is trying to tell you. You cannot force down other persons to accept only your point of view. To empathize with someone is to try and understand a thing from that person's perspective, trying to understand that person's point of view. Let me give you a very simple anecdote and demonstrate what exactly we mean by empathizing. During the school, most of the students had opted for going in for nurse training, nursing. So, during that training period, almost 2 months had passed, and one day the professor of those students asked them to take up a pop quiz. In the pop quiz, he had written down several questions relating to their syllabus, relating to their course. The students, of course, were brilliant and were able to answer the questions in a brief period of time. Finally, the last question, which they happened to read and on which they all got stuck, was a question which was not taken from their syllabus. The question was, what is the name of the woman who cleans the school every day? The students were all taken aback. I mean, they thought, is this a kind of a joke? Okay. How should we know the name of the woman who comes to clean the school every day? We didn't even bother to pay attention to that. Okay. We didn't empathize. Okay. You didn't feel for that person like even that person is equally a member of your school. But nevertheless, there was a vague reflection in everybody's mind. Okay. Like she's tall, she's dark, I think she's 50 years old, etc. But nobody, none of the students were able to tell the name of that servant who was coming to clean the school every day. That's right. That exactly is what empathy is all about. The professor, after giving them this example, told them that in your respective careers, you are going to meet many people. All of them are going to be equally significant, equally important. Everyone deserves your attention and care, even if all you do is simply smile and say hello. So, lesson learned, isn't it? One of the most essential communication skills is giving and receiving feedbacks. Providing a constructive feedback as well as giving someone praise can greatly increase motivation and build up one's morale. Always listen to feedback and act positively on it. If you're unsure about the aspect of the feedback, simply ask the question to gain clarification from the other person. Let's face it, we are humans, and human beings find it tough to give and receive feedbacks. Many of us get defensive when we hear a negative feedback. But on the contrary, honest critical feedback can actually help you to correct the wrongs that you are doing. None of us is perfect. There has to be a certain margin of error that we tend to make from time to time. And hence, it is very essential that it is these feedbacks that help us to rectify those errors and better our performances. Giving a simple example, being the owner of a resort, we generally give a book a diary to a customer who is stayed at the resort for a short duration of time and ask him or her to give their suggestions and feedbacks in that register or in that diary. When we go through the feedback later on, we come across several comments that have been given. Some are based on the quality of the food, some tell us about the upholstery not being as clean as they had expected, some say the bathroom had not been cleaned properly, etc. So on and so forth. So when we go through that comments, that is when we learn, we come to know that these are the drawbacks that we are going through in our resort, which has to be rectified. And we go on further to instruct the persons who are supposed to take care of the hospitality, of the cleaning, and ask them to make the required changes. Ask them to see to it that those same mistakes are not repeated again. So that is how what we have done here is we have been able to rectify one mistake or something wrong that had been going on at the resort. So you see how effective criticism has helped us, a feedback has helped us to better our performance. We can also make use of the stroke kick method while giving feedback. And what does that mean? Stroke kick. Okay. While giving feedbacks, first you should offer something positive before directly diving into the negative aspects. If all we hear is negative, then we tend to not take whatever is being told by that person at the face value. Okay. So what one needs to do is first say something good about, for example, the resort as we were discussing. Tell us the plus points, and then you can go and also speak about the negative points. That is the best way in which one is supposed to give your feedback. I hope everything that has been covered by me in this particular lecture and presentation on effective communication skill has proven quite helpful to you. Trust me, I have enjoyed interacting with you all on this platform, Botany for You, and I hope to keep coming here again and again to speak on several other issues. Thank you once again for watching and giving me a patient ear. Have a wonderful day.